Hi, everybody. Welcome to a very special edition of the Working Songwriter Podcast where the tables are turned. I'm not going to be the one asking the questions this time. One of my dearest and oldest friends, BJ Barham from American Aquarium, is going to come on the show and interview me about a new album that I am in the process of putting out right now. And it's kind of a unique album in that it's actually a re-recording of my debut album. My debut album called Nation of Heat was a solo acoustic album. And this re-recording is a complete reimagining of that solo acoustic album with a full band, with members of My Morning Jacket, with members of The Killers, of Jason Isbell's 400 unit. So it's a completely new thing, a completely new album. And I thought, what better person to interview me and kind of hear about this new album process and how the old album came together and how the two dovetail together than my good friend BJ Barham of American Aquarium. So let's welcome him on now.
What's up, dude?
Dude, how are you? Thanks for doing this.
Hanging, man. I am so stoked to be. I was crushed when Tim did this a few years ago because I really thought I had a good shot at it. But I'm happy to play second place and do the second one.
Well, when people ask me, have you made a lot of friends in the music business? I'm like, I have two true friends in the music business, and it's Tim from Strand of Oaks and BJ Barham, who I've known you guys for over a decade apiece. And I mean, I have a lot of friends, but I mean, you guys are the only ones that I'm like constantly texting and calling to complain about things. So I think that's the mark of a true friend, right?
You're my. I would say I've got less than 5. I wouldn't even call them friends. I have some acquaintances. You're the one true. I talk to you probably weekly.
Yeah.
Through text or calls. And yeah. I think any idea that we've had has been bounced off the other one.
Good or bad.
Good or bad. Before it went to the internet, it was like, hey, I got this idea.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Well, thanks for being here. I know this is release week for you, actually, for Chicamacomico. I think I pronounced that right.
Yeah, Chicamacomico.
And I know release week for you is busier than it is for most artists because, and you're the one that got me on this train doing this myself, you fulfill and do everything within your own merchandise store. So release week for you is not, smoking a cigar on the beach and counting your money. Release week for you is getting the music to the people. So I really appreciate you taking the time this week to do the interview.
Oh, no worries, man. We spent this weekend. I went and got my post office lady Starbucks and donuts this morning.
Yeah.
To say thank you for the last 48 hours because I put them through hell the last 48 hours.
That is a good because you got me on this tip of mailing stuff out myself, and this will be the first time this summer with this new album that I have to do the big push with the new album. So I guess bribing the postal workers is the way to go.
Yeah, and the good thing about having a small town post office is there's only like 3 ladies. So I'm not going into like Raleigh Central Hub and buying coffee for like 30 guys.
Right.
It's just 3 middle-aged ladies who wanted some Frappuccinos this morning and some Krispy Kreme, and that was easy.
Easy. Wow, Frappuccinos too, not just the drip coffee.
Oh, no, they went large. Like large raspberry, mocha, frappa, whatever they sell there.
God bless them. You got to bang someone out when you had the chance,
Yeah.
Well, right on, man. Well, hey, so first things first, it's crazy. Like you knew this first album when it came out years ago, like 15 years ago at this point, because we randomly met. Maybe it was random, maybe it wasn't, maybe it was predestined, who knows, but we randomly met when I was touring this album originally DIY style 15 years ago.
Yeah, I like how the internet says that this record came out in 2009 because for me, I met you in February of 2008 and I still have my burnt copy that you gave me at the show. And the funny story about meeting you was the promoter at one of our Lincoln Theater shows in Raleigh came up to us like a week before the show. It was like, hey, there's this kid. I'm friends of a friend with him. He went to Carolina. Is there any way he can get like a 30-minute spot, 1 of 4? It might have been 1 of 5.
Yes, first of 5.
It was really like You might have went on at 6 o'clock.
Yes.
And I was like, sure, whatever. Like, I don't really want a 5-band bill, but if you're asking, yes. And so I remember kind of before I ever met you, there was this animosity of like, fuck this dude for calling in a favor. Like we've already got 4 full bands. Why do I need some folky opening up the show? And I remember being there, and you walked on stage. We talked casually backstage. But you walked on stage, and I remember from the first note, me and 3 or 4 guys in the band couldn't take our eyes off of you. It was, we were standing out front being like, what the fuck? This is better than any band on this bill, including us. And it's happening at 6:15 p.m. And you played for 30 minutes, and I want to say you might have only been able to fit all the Nation of Heat songs in.
Those were the only songs I had.
Yeah, but it makes me so mad that at that point in your career, that was all you had. Most of us had shitty covers with a couple originals. You had Nation of Heat, which still goes down as one of my Desert Island records.
Oh man!
Anytime I'm turning people onto you, I'm just like, here's the simplest appetizer. Here's 6 songs. Listen to this.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a loaded first listen because it's pretty incredible. Like when I compare it to John Prine's debut, I'm not saying that because you're my friend. Me and you have told each other honestly, good and bad.
Yeah.
It's one of the only things I can equate to a debut being flawless.
Oh man.
Guy Clark's up there, but this record, I remember it was in the van for 2 to 3 years straight. And very rarely in a 6-man band does everyone agree on something. Nation of Heat was one of those ones that when it got put on, everybody was like, oh, fuck yeah, Joe Pug. And I think that was the start of our friendship. I think paths crossed occasionally, but I'd say by 2012, we were pretty thick as thieves. Anytime one of us was coming through a town, you introduced me to so many great musicians. Your opening acts, I guess, at the time. So I'm very thankful for that, and just thankful for a decade plus of songs and friendship.
Oh man, mainly that, man. I do have to say, because you come out every time I was playing in the Triangle, and then I was living in Austin, Texas, and what was really interesting, and I'm sure you've talked about this a million times, you've probably talked about it on my podcast before, the way that, American Aquarium was heading in this direction. You didn't know where it was going to go. You basically make Burn, Flicker, and Die, which is going to be your last record, and then you're basically discovered in the Red Dirt circuit in Texas, which rejuvenates your career. Obviously, things would blow up from there in a crazy way, but that's like what took you off of life support. Well, I happen to be living in Texas when that blew up for you. So I felt like you would be in Texas like 4 times a year, and I get to see you when you come through Stubbs at Austin or wherever.
Yeah, I remember those days as we got to come by the house, and this is before either one of us had kids. We were still wild free and just songwriters living on the run. And it was a weird time for us because 2012 was supposed to be like this end, and then Texas kind of saved everything, which was, we didn't see it coming. And I still have the text messages, like screenshots of the text messages of that first show we played at Stubbs, and you were sitting in the balcony, and you live texted the show. So when I got off stage, it was like, you have 175 text messages from Joe Pug. And I literally, it was like a sports commentator, song by song, breaking it down, what you like, what you didn't like. It was one of the greatest show moments ever. Because when friends come out, you always get the obligatory, man, great show. I had to head out early, but man, it was good seeing you. I got off to literally a play-by-play of a 90-minute set, and it was beautiful.
Well, I've always been a fan, but I'm pretty sure that when I don't drink as heavy as I used to drink back then, but I was drinking pretty heavy at that time, and I was such a fan of. My favorite album of yours remains to this day. I like it all, but my favorite album remains Wolves, which Brad Cook produced. Just love that record so much. And that show, I mean, you basically played that song, maybe not that record, not in order, but you basically played all the songs off Wolves. And so I was just up in the balcony. I live texted you the whole show.
I really wish you would just get a job at a publication for like 6 months, just so I could pull quotes from that text message and then put it in my press reel.
Well, there you go.
So I've got a few questions, man, because I met you in 2008, but I don't really know a lot of the origin stuff of where Nation of Heat came from. I know you went to Carolina, you left, moved to Chicago, Carpenter, all the the bullet point bio stuff. But what led to, I guess, the songs that would become Nation of Heat?
I was playing this really robust open mic scene in Chicago, and I was just on fire in my early 20s. I really wanted to create something. I really wanted to contribute, whatever my version of the great American novel would be. But, I didn't have the time or attention span or intelligence or talent to write a novel. But songs are shorter and easier to get your hands around. And so I was just really inspired by that idea. I was really inspired by, obviously, as you can tell from what that early album sounds like, early Dylan. But I was also really, I'm glad you name-checked that first John Prine record. I was really inspired by John Prine, that self-titled debut where he's sitting on the hay bale. I love that. He came out of Chicago, very early on. That's where he had written that record, very famously as a mailman in Chicago. So I identified with that one really closely. And I started playing clubs around town. I recorded a lot of it in Chicago at a place called Rax Tracks. And then small door after small door opened up for me. I never ended up with, the keys to the world in a Columbia Records contract and a shot to play SNL and Letterman or anything like that. But the keys to the world to allow me to go in the clubs across America to play these songs, things just opened up one after another. And I suppose the really big break was Steve Earle asking me to come on the road and open for him in the United States and in Europe for about 3 months. That really took me out of Chicago and put me onto the stream of reality that I inhabit right now, talking to you.
Yeah, that's a pretty massive break. Most of us hope to go on tour with somebody one level above us, but when you're going on with I don't say this lightly, a living legend like Steve, that's immediately being put in front of a fan base that's hungry for songs.
I got to quit my job. It went from I have a job that I show up at 8 o'clock in the morning with boots on to I have a new thing that I do now, and it happened pretty much overnight.
Man, that is incredible. So I've read some of the lore about trading favors for recording sessions or sneaking in late at night. Were you Christofferson style, like just a janitor who hung around until nobody was singing to a microphone and then playing some songs? Or was it like a classic early band trading favors for scrap studio time?
I had a buddy who was in classic music business fashion. I don't know how they really get away with this, but it's like, if you're the intern, you just straight up don't get paid. And so very good buddy of mine, Jeremy David Miller, who was playing as well, he was an intern at Rax Tracks, and his payment was not cash money. His payment was, if there's no one else in for a session, you can use the time yourself. And he used that for me to be able to record those initial songs.
How long did it take?
It was a bunch of different sessions over the course of one fall. You know what I mean? So I'd say it was probably 5 or 6 different sessions, maybe just 3 or 4. I don't know. And we'd go in there. It was just a couple hours long. There's no band. It's just me. So, I would go in there and fumble around. I could barely play guitar, couldn't really tune it, couldn't sing in tune. I would blow out my voice after, an hour and a half because I didn't know how to sing right. I couldn't keep time. If you listen to that original record, everything pushes and pulls by 15, 20, 25 BPM. So it was pretty raw. It was very raw, but I think that ended up being the attractive thing for it to a lot of listeners.
Yeah, I think when you say raw, I think you look at it as almost like you're like a shameful thing. I think it adds a level of honesty. And that's the good thing about an acoustic guitar with no drums is the average person listening isn't hearing it push and pull. They're listening to a guitar and you singing to that guitar. And I think the words for me, and it's funny you mentioned Dylan, because very few times does the music not matter to me. The rudimentary, guitar picking was secondary. It was what you were saying.
Yes.
I was angry at you because you were someone who was definitely a contemporary.
Right.
We're close in age. And at that point, I'd been doing it a good 2 years longer than you.
2 years, yeah.
Ages when you're 22 years old.
It is, yeah.
I was so angry that your one-liners, like everybody, when you're young, if you can get one-liner into a song, you're happy.
Yeah.
Yours was just a song of one-liners. And then you would get to the next one, and it was just another song of really great one-liners.
Yeah.
That all made this beautiful big picture. And it made me so mad because I was like, how did he get this good this early? Like, do I need to start being like a carpenter? Like, do I need to am I wearing the wrong boots?
And his Adonis-like good looks, I mean, to boot. I mean, just, what is this David Gilmour in 1972? It was, I'm sure it was a tough pill to swallow. Yeah, I don't know. I think there was something to it where it was one of the few albums in my life where the writing process was really intertwined with like playing the songs live, before they were recorded. And I think maybe there was kind of like that one-liner feel to a lot of them, because to keep people's attention in the club, you had to have kind of evocative or provocative lines to keep people. It's hard to listen to a dude with an acoustic guitar for 30 minutes. I mean, it's hard. And so
especially if they don't have anything to say.
Well, I mean, if they don't have anything to say, it's impossible to listen to them. And even if they do have something to say, if it's not in the right style, it's still hard,
Yeah, I remember, what was it? Around here, the streetlights call themselves stars. I remember the first time I heard that, I almost cut it off and threw it out the fucking window because I was mad at you.
Yeah.
But there's tons of those. And Ryan, our old guitar player,
yeah, of course,
he was just as much of a fanatic for that record as I was. And we would go through it almost like you go through like a hip hop record and dissect these like really brilliant like one-liner slices. And it was just, the hits kept coming. You would get, it's a 3.5 minute song that floors you every 10 seconds. It truly was I didn't know how to process it. I'd never seen anybody my age doing that. And I'm sure that's what everybody else in the Chicago scene felt with you and with Prime, sitting in the same room with someone who, what was the cherub good looks and the curly hair.
Yeah, man.
And the baby blues, man. And then all of a sudden you start spitting songs like that 35 and 40-year-olds can't write. It was truly remarkable. Well,
but now I'm 35 and close to 40 years old, and now I'm a person that can't write songs like that anymore. So
get out of here.
So
get out of here.
It all comes back to haunt you in the end. Yeah, it's a weird record. I don't know. It's weird. I don't think you had this experience because your breakthrough record was a couple records in. Burn, Flicker, and Die was a good, 4 or 5 records in?
Yeah, that would have been record 5.
5, okay. So for me, to me, when I think of that, you can invest a lot more of your ego in being proud of a record that took you 5 to get to, because you had to learn a lot of stuff to do it. And it's like, yeah, well, I busted my ass on the road and in the studio and learning my instrument. And yeah, I'm glad people like this. I worked at this. For me, I have a weird relationship with Nation of Heat because just out of the gate, it just seemed to work really well. You know what I mean? And it's still, to this day, the album, that is what 85 to 90% of people who come to my shows, that's the album that they know. That's the album that they want. I got to get to 6 out of those 7 songs every time. So I kind of have a weird relationship with it because, the egotistical part of me feels like I can't take credit for it in a way. You know what I mean? Whereas other albums that I've labored over, that, spent all this time on, they just don't catch people's attention quite as much. I don't know what to make of that. I do know that I've kind of come to peace with it. I'm like, man, I'm just glad I have something that some amount of people are interested in listening to. and coming to a show to hear. And thank God for that. And I won't look a gift horse in the mouth anymore.
Is it a weird relationship? Do you feel like peaking early?
Yeah.
Is that
well,
a weird
so
moment?
that's
for you
how I
mentally?
used to feel about it. And I used to feel very self-conscious about it. Of like, man, you know, I peaked early there. Like that first one came out of the gates hard and it was tough to recreate that. But I've since learned as I've gotten older that that's not a great way to look at it, because it's not like this is comedy. Like when you're a comedian, you can tell your special one time and that's it. You know what I mean? You can't go out on the road with the same special anymore. With music, whenever your beloved album comes out, your most beloved album comes out, whenever that comes out within your oeuvre, or I don't know how you, oeuvre, I don't know how you pronounce that.
I think it's
whenever that comes out, I don't know. People are going to want to continue to hear those songs over time. You know what I mean? And you can, whether it's album 5 or album 1, people don't give a shit. They just want to hear you close the show with it. They just want to hear you close the show with I Hope He Breaks Your Heart. They just want to hear you close the show with Speak Plainly Diana or Hymn 101. They don't give a shit if it's on record 1 or record 5, and they shouldn't. It doesn't matter, you know?
Yeah, I think it's very much you've got a 18-song clip every night that you're trying to fit, and you're trying to put the best punches in those 18 songs.
Yes.
So I think it's amazing that you came out of the gate with just 7 punches that 20 years later still stack.
People still want to hear them. I was in Columbus, Ohio a month ago, and there's a room full of, I was about to say kids. They're about my age now. You know, they're mid-30s now, but there's a room full of people there that they still want to hear that same damn song, man. It is not lost on me how wonderful that is. It's not lost on me at all.
That's the beauty about time and place. I still, when I hear that record, it reminds me of midnight to 4 a.m. drives going from, you know, one self-booked menu venue to another self-booked menu venue.
Baby.
And trying to find something that kept my attention long enough to where I wouldn't doze off and run us off the highway.
Right.
And I have such good memories with that record because, like I said, everybody in the band at that time loved that record. And I'm not blowing smoke. It was a passionate favorite.
It was that album, and it was the first 3 albums by Insane Clown Posse that kept you.
Well, I thought that didn't need to be said. I thought everybody just assumed.
Everyone knows you're a juggalo. Yeah.
Everybody based off of my output. I just thought that was kind of common knowledge.
Right.
But it's really neat to me because, like you said, we have very different trajectories to getting to records that resonated.
Yes.
Literally, I can't listen to my first 2 records without cringing. I couldn't imagine listening to my first record and being like, "Yep, it's perfect. It's brilliant."
The problem is, well, first of all, that record isn't perfect, but also it's I cringe at stuff that I did later. Not all of it. I mean, you know, I stand by most of the records I put out, but you know, I definitely cringe at stuff I put out later a lot more than I do that first record. So I mean, you know, we all have cringy stuff. It was a weird thing. I don't know how that album came together. I've tried to replicate it ever since. Obviously, you try to replicate something that worked for you, and some things can't be replicated. They were from a moment in time. They were from a geographical place. They were embodied in that place and who you were at that time. I mean, it's just, you know, you can't step into the same river twice, I guess, and that's especially true with records.
Well, the good thing, I think, is you'll always have these songs. And I think a lot of people spend their entire career trying to get 7 songs as good as those 7 songs.
Well, now I'm just starting to feel uncomfortable about all the praise that you're.
As a friend, I would tell you, like, 5 of those are great, and 2 of them could use some work.
Fair enough.
But
and I know which too.
As a writer, and as someone who loves language, and modification of language, it floored me. And the fact that we became friends just added to the lore of that record for me, because I was like, I know the guy wrote this. Like, you don't meet Bob Dylan. You don't meet people that write these records that change your life. And I'm not kidding, Joe, when I say that record changed a lot for me and everybody in our band.
What a trip, man.
But anyway, I'm going to stop blowing smoke.
Yeah, please, make me deeply.
Yeah, just edit some of this to where I just tell you it's okay.
Yeah, I will.
So you re-recorded it. And to remind people, this is not a remix. This is not repackaging. This is not a new cover with the same songs. This is an entirely reimagined record.
Yes. Okay. It couldn't be more different. I mean, once it's finally out, people will really understand how different it is. But that first record is basically just me with an acoustic guitar. And this is me 15 years later with, having, like I mentioned to you, like I didn't know how to play the damn guitar. I didn't know how to sing. I didn't know how to stay in tune. I didn't know how to keep time. And then I would spend the next 10 or 15 years on the road and in the studio learning how to do all those things. And it had begun to eat at me a fair amount that I could recognize that there was just something about that record that was different than the other ones that I had made, that was just sort of more compelling. And it killed me and it ate at me that it had been accomplished in a way before I had any skills to kind of realize it. And I, for a while, just kind of chalked it up to like, that's the way it goes, man. That's how life works, and you move on and you create new stuff. But then I realized there's sort of an advantage. Both you and I have been very DIY throughout the years. We both, over time, we've both been signed to record labels and done stuff like that and had some publishing stuff going on, but we've done a lot of the stuff DIY. And I was in a position owning both the publishing and the original masters, where a lot of artists maybe wouldn't be able to go back and record songs. But because I hadn't sold it to anybody, I basically realized at a certain point, like, I could totally re-record this and literally no one could stop me from doing that. Like this is mine. I can do whatever I want. And so that is the plan that I came up with. And I had a lot of favors to call in from friends, like wonderful musicians that I've met over the years. And not only favors to call in, but, guys to hire in bands that I've loved for years, but never had a project that they could work on. Well, now I have a budget and a project for them to work on and contribute something, incredible to it. So, I just went whole hog and I produced this the way that I would produce a brand new record. I put a bunch of money, a lot of time and money into this, getting this exactly right. And this is what Nation of Heat would have sounded like if I had known how to do it in the first place. This is what I would have wanted it. And so it kind of realized itself. Finally, 10, 15 years later, here it is realized with a band.
That's amazing. I can't wait to hear it.
You want to hear a track right now?
I would love to hear a track.
Awesome.
I've only heard the stuff up on Spotify.
Awesome. Well, this is the only track that's up on Spotify now. Maybe by the time people hear this, the second single will be out, but this is definitely the one that's out now, and this is the title track.
Across from the prison and beside the Great Lake, below the rooftops and above the highway, the spirits pay rent on the basements they haunt, and the painters just draw pictures of the things that they want. Cook my dinner on the blacktop street. I come from the Nation of Heat. Outside the train station there's a bold painted sign. It says, try to be patient, don't forget to choose sides. We got the loudest explosions you ever heard. We got $2 soldiers and $10 words. If I didn't own boots, I wouldn't need feet. swift and so vicious are the carnival rides. In the carnival barker, we'll yell your name for a bribe. We got billboards for love and Japanese cars. It ain't rare to hear the streetlights call themselves stars. The more that I learn, the more that I cheat. I come from the nation of heat. I've seen skeleton mothers and hungry folks across the street from the kitchens that cook dinner the most. Sometimes you hear whispers by the dark of the moon that we promised too much and gave it too soon. Even our coughs and our fevers compete. I come from the nation of heat. Blackened borders with smiles, our immigrant sons. We measure loneliness in miles and misery in tons. There's a straw-headed man roaring away from the shore. He says it's a shame they don't let you have slaves here anymore. I'm the ugliest man that you'll ever meet. I come from the nation of heat.
So yeah, man.
So good. So good. Who's playing drums on that?
Yeah, so that's Mark Steprow. Mark is a drummer I've known for years. I first met him when he was playing on the road with Hayes Carl, and now he doesn't go on the road too much anymore because he's become the producer, Butch Walker. He plays on a lot of Butch's stuff, and then when he does tour, he's on the road with Jacob Dylan in the Wallflowers.
Oh, that's a rough gig.
Yeah, rough gig. Yeah, tough gig.
Yeah, it swings so nice. Like there's a vibe, and you know it's funny. I'm sure you're tired of hearing it, but the early version of that song is extremely Dylan-esque.
Yeah, of course,
in one of the best ways possible. This is also Dylan-esque, but like full band,
more of a blonde on blonde type of feel for sure.
100%.
Yeah,
and it's got that vibe that like the drums are just monster. Mark, bravo, man.
He that's the perfect example of, you know, when you're younger and you're playing with people, you just, chances are you don't know someone who can play their instrument like that. I mean, 100%. Like there's a 99.99999% chance that you don't know that guy, and even if you did know him, frankly, you couldn't afford him or get him to play on it. And,
exactly. You were dealing with owner operators in the early days.
Yeah.
And when you came down to, do I want to play? And everybody wants to play as loud and fast or as much as they can.
Yes.
And that right there is a professional drummer who's playing to a song and serving a song.
Yes.
And man, that is, it's when the band can show off like that and not step on the song at all, where the vocals are still out front, the message is still clear, but you're also find yourself moving to it.
It's funny you would say that, because the guy that mixed this record, Joe Chuddick, who's a great mix engineer, the first mixes that he sent me back were band mixes, basically. Like, so it is the band moving in that way. And if it was a rock song, it would be mixed with the band kind of up here and the voice nested in. And I had to write him back and say, listen, this mix sounds great. It's going in the right direction, but here's the deal. It's still a singer-songwriter record, right? So you actually, the singer-songwriter record, you got to bring the band down another 15%, and the voice has to sit on top in a way that it would be completely uncomfortable for it to do in like a rock record. Yeah. And I actually think your records are mixed like this a lot, because particularly something like Wolves, where you have this full rock band sound, but it's still, the thing that makes it a singer-songwriter record is the mix plucks that voice and really just crowns it on top in a way that in rock records it just isn't done.
Well, I think it's important because first and foremost, I consider myself a singer-songwriter.
Right.
And so I just happened to have a 6-piece rock and roll band backing me.
Yeah.
And so I think with any singer-songwriter record, songs are the most important part. And I think that's because us as songwriters, they need to be out front because we're proud of what we're saying. I think with a lot of rock music, they're not so sure of what they're saying, or they don't know what they're saying.
Yes. Yeah.
And they'd like I did it a lot on early records when I wasn't sure of my voice.
Mm-hmm.
I would just hide behind the band. The band would do all the heavy lifting, and it didn't matter what nonsense I mumbled, as long as the band was holding their weight. It was great. And I think that's what scared me about never putting out a solo record until I think 2016.
Right.
So 10 years into my career, I finally was mentally able enough to put out.
Was Rockingham your first solo?
Rockingham was my first and only solo record. Bare bones.
Okay.
Brush. There's not a single cymbal on that record. It's just funny. Brushes and bare drums. But do you have any more we get to listen to? Because
not in this particular episode. I'll send you a link to the rest of it. But
I need to hear the rest of this because it's reminding me of Dylan.
Yeah.
Which, again, in a good way, not in a rip-off way. But it's also reminding me of like a different stage of Dylan. Like your first was like the first couple records of Dylan, and this is no. I've got the band behind me.
Yeah. I think Dylan is really interesting in that he basically invented the job that me and you have, and so in some ways it is really tough to evade comparisons at a certain point, and at a certain point you just have to embrace it and realize that hey, that's just, if you weren't the one that invented the paradigm, then tough on you. And there's probably some tough parts about inventing a paradigm that you would want to have to deal with yourself. So maybe just be grateful and move on.
I think any songwriter worth their weight gets compared to Dylan at some point in their career.
Sure.
It's all derivative. And so like he invented it. Pop culture, folky singer-songwriter.
Yes. I mean, it was just and it was at the center of culture at that time. Like when he would put out a record, they'd have like these press conferences, you know what I mean? And like, and that is just such a different, compare that to 2022, where even if you're like a big band, like a massive band, like trying to get people to listen to your new album, just listen to it. And it's free on Spotify. Just listen to it. That's hard. Yeah. Much less get people to show up at a press conference to hear that in 3 weeks you're going to put out a new record and it's going to be on the radio, and maybe they'll be able to buy it at a record store three weeks later. I mean, it was just a different cultural time.
Yeah, and that whole era was a phenomenon. He became a superstar.
Absolute superstar.
Folk singers weren't superstars. Woody Guthrie wasn't a superstar.
No.
Till much later in life, after the legacy.
Even then, never really graduated to like that next crazy level.
I think the legacy of Woody Guthrie is more famous than actually Woody Guthrie.
Absolutely correct.
But Dylan was a superstar.
Yes.
And he was just an acoustic guitar and a voice, and not a good voice.
He was the Ed Sheeran of his time.
Please tell me this is being edited out.
Yeah.
Blasphemy. Yeah, I think that as long as the rest of the record stays true to that, I think that not only are more people going to be brought to the table, but everyone who is already sitting at the table is going to be satisfied with this second helping.
I hope so, and if not, that's fine. I just really, like I told you, it had been eating at me. And in some ways I was like, I gotta do this for me. And maybe, worst comes to worst, I'll break even on it. But, I just had to put it together.
That's the fun part about art. You created this thing, if you made this thing a year ago and then tried to reinvent it, like that's such a cool idea. Like, hey, this is the first thing I ever did.
Yeah.
10, 15 years later, I've learned a lot. It's a craft.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Here is what that thing you already love would sound like with experience, with 15 years of mistakes and lessons learned.
Yes.
Here it is presented in time with a full band. Like I said, I'm not going to lie to you, Joe. I was worried that the band was going to step on something that I loved.
Yes.
But that band only added to it.
Yeah.
And that's a rare thing.
It is. I had the opposite worry when I started working on it, which is like, I was like, all right, I don't want this to be acoustic guitar, like Nation of Heat with a rhythm section behind it. Like, so acoustic guitar, but we kind of paste a rhythm section. And so for that reason, like the first album is voice and acoustic guitar. This album, there's no acoustic guitar on the entire album at all whatsoever. Wow. And that was very intentional because I didn't want it to just be Nation of Heat with a rhythm section. I wanted it to be, I wanted the band to have the opportunity to take over, but not take over.
Who's doing that B3 work?
That is a guy named Phil Cronengold from Los Angeles. He also played all the B3 and accordion on my record, The Flood in Color. And man, there's a lot of good musicians in LA. It turns out.
Turns out. Have you heard that it's a music town?
It's a bit of a music town. Yeah, I mean, so much of this record, I ended up editing it and arranging it at my home, but like almost all of it was recorded by musicians themselves in studios in Los Angeles and Nashville, because that's where all the good guys are.
That's amazing. Yeah,
good guys.
I love how every single part serves the song. There's not like the B3 was prevalent, but it never stepped on anything. Man, that's special, Joe.
Thank you. I'm thrilled for you to hear the rest of the record. I really appreciate you taking this time during release week for you to come in and chat with me about it, man. Thank you, BJ.
Thanks so much I get to check this off the bucket list. I've always wanted to host Joe Pug's podcast for a week, and hopefully I did a decent job.
And oh yes, and now we need to. We'll just start our spin-off podcast where we talk about food and talk shit about people. And
if people could pay Patreon to just have a third-party access to our hour-long conversations once a week,
where you're stone cold sober, but I'm 6 glasses of Pinot Noir in.
Dude. CBS needs to add it to Tuesday night, man. Like, that's the sitcom of the year right there.
There you go. 2 old dudes complain. Thank you, BJ. I really appreciate it, brother.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Peace. Nation of Heat Revisited is not a remix. It's not a remaster. It's an entirely new album. A full band reimagining of my acoustic debut featuring members of The Killers, My Morning Jacket, Jason Isbell's 400 Unit, and many more. The cover artwork was designed by legendary Chicago artist Tony Fitzpatrick, and the liner notes were composed by Steve Earle. Head on over to joepugmusic.com to listen to the first single, and then click on the tab for our store to order a copy of 10-inch virgin vinyl with a gatefold booklet, or a CD, or a sweet embroidered logo cap, or a super soft album t-shirt. We got it all over there. We'll pack those items up ourselves and send them over to you from our offices in downtown Greenbelt, Maryland. Thank you for supporting 100% independent American music.